And then to our viewers as well, if you're just tuning in, day one of the National Elective Conference of the ANC. We're live here at Newzroom, different positions with our team on the ground so that we can give you that blow-by-blow coverage of how things are unfolding here over the next few days. You're absolutely right. Erin Bates spoke to us earlier. We'll talk to her again in just a moment about the soap opera that is unfolding on the sidelines of this elective conference, with that private prosecution case being opened, apparently, by former President Jacob Zuma against Cyril Ramaphosa. It's around the organizational report that we'll be focusing our discussion this morning. It's important this time because the ANC NEC convened a special sitting just earlier this month where it was meant to unpack, among other things, the findings of the Integrity Commission, right? And the reason why it was so anticipated was because of the Phala Phala issue and the cloud that is hanging over Cyril Ramaphosa's head as he comes into this conference. So let's bring in our colleague now, Erin Bates, for more on this. Erin, I've got the program for the next few days here. We're going to kick off at 9 o'clock with apparently arrival and registration of delegates, observers, of guests, people like me as well, you and me. Interdenominational prayers from around 8:30 this morning. Then there is that closed session which kicks off this afternoon. It's around 2 o'clock. And one wonders, why closed?
Well, of course, the ANC needs to have the privacy to deliberate. We will get wind of what happens in those meetings, not in real time. But because this is the governing party and elected by the public to lead, it's, of course, very important to find out what happens in those discussions.
Yeah.
And I do think, Michelle, you've mentioned the Phala Phala issue. That is distinct from this now sort of simmering private prosecution. There is a document which is doing the rounds, which seems to be a copy of the charge sheet. But just to emphasize that document, which we have not yet verified, is distinct from the certificate for private prosecutions, which is this nollie prosecute, which is the issue we've been debating. It's the license, effectively, that the former president would need in order to privately prosecute Ramaphosa. And so we're waiting for those details. I have tried to get hold of the national spokesperson for the NPA as well as the provincial spokesperson, because it would be the director of public prosecutions in the relevant province who would need to be involved in authorizing the nollie prosecute certificate. So that matter is outstanding. We are following it up and we're doing everything we can to verify as many details in law and in fact about this simmering case.
So we'll unpack the issues around that prosecution certificate or license in just a moment. But let's focus for a moment on what the Integrity Commission might say today. And, the question I suppose that our viewers will have is, how important is the findings and recommendations of a body like this within the ANC if we look at their track record and its effectiveness over the past few years?
Well, there is a lot of scrutiny and criticism of the Integrity Committee that is kind of a box-checking exercise. It could have a lot of rigor, and it does sort of in the ecosystem, the organogram of the ANC, play a very important role. But in terms of efficacy, rigor, swiftness, no less in terms of interrogating a matter involving the leader of the party, the Integrity Committee has been slow. We have now seen what's happened in Parliament, of course, that Section 89 process not moving forward. We also know the President has filed papers in the Constitutional Court. The ATM, in turn, has filed its response. We're waiting to hear from the Speaker. So there's a lot of information around Phala Phala that may well now feed into that report that wasn't there before.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk to you more about the private prosecutions issue, so don't go away. I'm going to bring the discussion back to conference with Erin Bates as we continue to talk about the sideshows that are happening. It's not just what's unfolding here behind these closed plenary sessions or even here in this media room. A big talking point heading into the conference, and we talked about timing in politics, Erin. Former President Jacob Zuma apparently launching this private prosecution.
Yes, Michelle, and I do think it's interesting to note that this is happening outside of the processes at the NEC. Of course, it's going to have bearing on the discussions at the conference, but this legal process is in a different forum. And we know from the policy conference earlier this year, we know from the numbers from branches walking into conference now, that there is consolidated support, at least within this formal process, for President Cyril Ramaphosa. Many branches want to see a second term. Many branches want to see him continue to lead the party and indeed the country country. The ANC is going through profound tensions and challenges. We heard the president yesterday at that gala dinner talking about headwinds, about the storm, saying even turbulence within the ANC.
Wanting to go back to the basic principles of the ANC.
Yes, and giving a scorecard effectively of what he's been doing, including, he said, fighting state capture and corruption. Bear in mind, former President Jacob Zuma was in that very room, and this charge sheet and summons have been filed on Ramaphosa mere hours earlier. But I do think it's interesting to see that this process, this legal challenge, which is obviously heavily politically loaded, comes almost left field. And so the president is dealing now with that on one front. He's dealing with the Phala Phala matter on the other front. No indication yet whether the state will be prosecuting him in that regard. The Hawks are investigating. We're told 70-odd prosecutors. But here, within the realms of the conference, what is the sentiment? What is the support?
The former president himself attending the conference as a delegate. What do we make of, again, when we look at the numbers about how safe Cyril Ramaphosa is? I mean, his rival has about less than half of the votes that he has coming into this conference for a second term.
Yes, and that is what we're going to need to find out as the days move on. Of course, there are sort of nominations that come from the floor. Yeah. That can be a game changer. Things were certainly very consolidated by the end of the policy conference, and there was a mood walking out of here, as subdued as it was, as a kind of lackluster, as a kind of policy conference as it was, that Ramaphosa was secure. I think maybe 2 weeks, a week ago, things were looking like they were in very different play to where we stand today.
Yeah. We know that 24 hours in politics is an incredibly long time.
An aeon.
Exactly. Never mind a few days of an elective conference. Erin Bates, thanks very much indeed for that. Erin is with me here throughout the day, Ayanda, as we continue to give you analysis of some of the big issues on the sidelines of this conference. Cyril Ramaphosa and the number of nominations that he has. Is he coming into this conference for a second term feeling safe, feeling confident? What might unfold on the floor of these plenary sessions over the next few days? For now, it's back to you in studio.